Let me tell you about a time that completely transformed my father's views on the paranormal. He used to laugh off any talk of ghosts or the afterlife, insisting that the living were the only things worth fearing. But what happened one night changed him from a skeptic to someone who couldn't shake off a deep-seated fear. My parents own a big house, surrounded by a 10-foot fence and secured with an electric gate. It's practically impossible to get in without triggering an alarm or being caught on camera. One evening, when my dad was home alone, something strange happened. He was relaxing in the living room when he heard a persistent, hard knocking on the front door. It wasn't a frantic knock, but steady and unyielding, like a relentless heartbeat. As my father approached the door, the persistent knocking ceased abruptly, just as his hand was about to grasp the knob. When he opened it, there stood a boy, around 14 years old, standing eerily still on the top step of the porch, about 5 or 6 feet away. The boy wore a plain hoodie, green cargo shorts, and sneakers with gray socks. His hair was neatly brushed to the side, and his skin was ghostly pale. My father was baffled and speechless. Before he could gather his thoughts, the boy spoke up. "I'm lost. Can I come inside?" The words sent a chill down my father's spine, paralyzing him. The boy's voice was calm and clear, but it had an unsettling, rehearsed quality. "I am cold and lost. I am frightened," he continued, each word deliberate and mechanical, adding to the unnerving atmosphere. My father noticed that even though the sun had set, the temperature was still in the low 80s, yet the boy wore a hoodie. This odd detail jolted him back to his senses. "No, get off my property," he said firmly. "Please, I am only a boy." "I am cold," the boy responded. The boy then lifted his head slightly, revealing completely white eyes. When my father locked eyes with him, he felt as if something inside him shriveled and died. It was as if the boy's voice echoed clearly in his mind, louder and more insistent, though my father couldn't remember seeing his lips move. "From this point on, Neil, your behavior is abhorrent. Let me in until you are alone inside," the boy's voice seemed to command, filling my father's mind with an overwhelming, eerie presence. When the boy mentioned his first name, my father slammed the door shut and locked the deadbolt. He turned off every light, activated the alarm system, and spent the night in terror, sitting alone in the living room. Every so often, he heard knocking from the window across the room, but he forced himself not to look behind the curtains. When I asked why he didn't call the police, he said he was too terrified to move. He felt that even though the boy remained outside, it could have easily entered if it wanted to. I researched and found stories about black-eyed children known for similar behavior. However, my father insists the eyes were icy white and the voice seemed ageless. I've concluded that this entity must have been something demonic. The cameras didn't capture anyone entering the property or approaching the front door. The one aimed at the entryway was positioned at an angle inside, creating a blind spot where the boy stood perfectly on the porch step, as if he knew exactly how to avoid being seen. My dad has never been on medication, and he's always been truthful, so I don't know what to make of this. This experience has deeply affected him. His behavior at work has changed, and he almost never goes out at night anymore. He's lost weight and installed a new security system, but every night he nervously paces the halls before bed, haunted by the fear that the white-eyed entity might return, and next time it won't knock, it will just enter. In the summer of 2011, a few friends and I decided to investigate the legends surrounding the woods behind our town's public baseball diamond. Rumor had it that these woods were the entrance to hell. It was true that 2 girls had been tragically raped and murdered there in the 80s, but the other tales seemed far-fetched. People spoke of hearing screams in the dead of night, finding cloven tracks in the dirt, and witnessing snow melting instantly on the forest floor. Adding to the eerie atmosphere, there was a cemetery on the far side of the woods. Around midnight, 8 or 9 of us got out of our cars and crossed the field towards the woods. We passed between what were ominously called the gates of hell and ventured into the trees. Most of us stopped a few dozen feet in, But my friends Malik and Peyton continued, disappearing deeper into the shadows. The rest of us lingered, talking loudly and laughing nervously to cover up how scared we really were. Suddenly, we all fell silent as we heard what sounded like children laughing just a few yards away. It wasn't the playful laughter of a playground. It was more like sneaky giggling, as if they were spying on us. My friend Damon suddenly shouted, "Whoa, watch out," and bolted out of the woods. Less than 30 seconds later, Malik and Peyton also came running out. The rest of us quickly followed them back to the field. Once we were all safely out, Damon explained that he had seen a figure emerge from behind a tree and come straight towards him. Peyton added that he and Malik had heard footsteps approaching and saw 2 glowing red eyes. All 3 were visibly shaken and eager to leave. While I smirked, half convinced they were imagining things, another part of me was genuinely spooked and had no intention of going back into those woods. The madness didn't stop there, unfortunately. On our way home, Peyton began to complain that his back was burning. When I lifted his shirt, I saw scratches all over his lower back, deep enough to draw blood. Everyone in the car started freaking out. Damon, who was driving, began gagging like he was about to throw up. He pulled over, stumbled out of the car, and collapsed on the grass. Peyton, Sarah, Jake, and I got out and hurried over to him. Meanwhile, the second car with the rest of our friends kept driving. Damon vomited a thick, paste-like substance, and then started cursing violently, shaking, and yelling at us in a voice that didn't sound like his own. I can't recall most of what he said, but the rapid spew of profanity made me want to lock myself in the car. Suddenly, Damon lunged at Sarah, but Jake and Peyton restrained him. Jake punched him hard in the stomach, knocking the wind out of him, and he collapsed onto the grass. That's when Sarah started screaming. Back down the road, from the direction we had just come, the streetlights began to flicker. We saw a lone figure moving down the middle of the street. It didn't seem to be using its legs, almost gliding or floating toward us. Sarah and I screamed and jumped back in the car. I scrambled behind the wheel and put it into drive. Jake and Peyton grabbed Damon and threw him in the back. The doors weren't even closed when I floored it, speeding down the road and blowing through a stop sign. I caught a glimpse of the figure getting closer in the rearview mirror, its glowing red eyes nearly making me lose my mind. We drove straight to the emergency room. Damon physically recovered, but was never the same mentally. He complained of hearing voices and seeing shadowy figures for years. Tragically, he took his own life in 2015. Peyton joined the seminary and is studying to become a priest. The rest of us are still haunted by that night and consider ourselves incredibly lucky to be alive. There's always a reason to be afraid. What do you think about these chilling encounters? Have you ever experienced something unexplainable? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a hair-raising story. Stay safe and remember, there's always a reason to be afraid.